I didn't make World of Warcraft. I was just there with thousands of other people that were making it at the same time. So before I get into the presentation, I would encourage you in your little goodie bags, there's a copy of the GRIP report. And one of the questions in that study talks about emerging methodologies. And there's one question in particular that talks about which methodologies do you feel most constrained from using? Gamification happens to win out as the #1 most constrained methodology amongst the people surveyed in this study. And if you go dig a little deeper, there's lots of detailed reasons as to why that is. And the #1 reason that people feel constrained about using gamification in research is they feel that they don't know enough to really understand either what it is or how to use it. So yay, you're in the right place. I'm here to educate you. I'm going to start off with just a real quick case study. I spun out of Blizzard last year, and so we're doing gamification-based research projects for a variety of different things. But I have this one, is this the right button? Let's see. Next, there we go. This one example. Now, usually when you hear gamification, you're probably thinking about fancy online game survey blah, blah, blahs. This is where we started. We actually made a physical board game that we took to focus groups in China. And we were trying to get at some underlying behaviors related to subscription and churn behavior. It's a really complicated question, even in either a survey or a discussion forum, because this is a product that has been around for 8+ years, right? And you're trying to understand what is the long-term change in a person's resonance with the franchise over time. And so if I was going to ask you, hey, how did you feel about that first year of Seinfeld? I don't really remember, to be honest, without a little bit more stimulation around the subject. And so what we did instead is we designed a set of game rules that we could use to walk people through their sort of life experience with World of Warcraft and get some really interesting, deep information out of that. So several benefits to this approach for us anyway. First was engagement. I mean, obviously this is gaming-based research for a group of gamers, and so yeah, engagement was pretty high already, but I've been at a fairly large number of focus group sessions for game-related research. It was off the charts here. We've had problems in the past in China where people would actually, we take a break and they would never come back. It happens. We had 106 out of 110 show for this study, and everybody stayed through the whole thing. Super high engagement. Much more accurate feedback we felt from the process compared to what we would get through traditional survey mechanisms. It overall felt very efficient as a data collection tool, because we're getting both some quant work through doing the study with the game board, as well as getting some really good video footage. And it was relevant. Now, for games research, because again, we're doing games-based research for games companies in this scenario, yeah, using a game board is going to be pretty relevant to them. But we've seen this be pretty successful in other verticals as well. Now, games are actually really good data collection tools as well. If you've done any work in the games world in the past, you'll know that their BI departments can be just dwarfing in size relative to their primary research function. This is data that we actually collected from the game board. So as part of the exercise, it's possible to design systems that are collecting behavioral triggers along the way. And from that, we are able to map out, for example, a couple of different segments of players and what was their level of personal engagement and enthusiasm with the franchise over time. These numbers at the bottom are just sort of like iterative deployments of the title over time. So super useful for them. We've gotten some good differentiation there as well. Games are fundamentally choice models, if you want to use some research vocabulary. You are maybe having some random rules in place, but you are making choices about what you want to do in a variety of scenarios. And so we started looking at what else can we do with games. Maybe we can look at replacing max diff with a card game. And that's actually something we're developing right now and is actually looking to be pretty effective. But again, you're just looking to show someone a scenario and get them to make a choice, but to do it in a much more engaging way. So I start with that little example, just because normally when you hear the word gamification, which just for the record, I only say that at research conferences. I don't use that outside in my my normal life because it doesn't mean anything to anyone, really. You know, you'll think of things like this. You'll think about badges. This is all the Foursquare badges that you can get by doing things. And badges are just ways of sharing what you've done with a particular product or service, right? Or maybe you think about achievements, which are good motivational drivers. So maybe you want to get somebody to try to pursue a particular line of activity. Like I've almost hit my 1,000 PowerPoint slide achievement. Actually, that's probably not even accurate after today. Dolly the Conference Sheep's another favorite of mine. But again, these are just ways of personally driving a person to achieve a goal. You think about avatars as personal representations of you, the human, in whatever your virtual experience is. This is actually my Xbox avatar over here on the left. He's looking very, very proud. You're thinking about high polished artwork, very expensive to develop. This is more what my artwork looks like if you have me try to draw something, which is why I don't do any of the artwork on the stuff we do. We have much more artistic people to handle that. And you'll think about cost, because if you're talking about online game development, now you're looking at budgets that are in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars if you want a sort of traditional AAA quality game. And it's complicated, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. It really, really doesn't. A game just has 3 things. Every game has only 3 things it needs to do. It needs rules. It needs to tell you how to play. Some games, maybe the rules are hidden, and part of the game is to figure out the rules, but that is part of what makes it a game, right? It has a winning state or victory conditions that is the goal that you're trying to reach, and it has psychological rewards. This is the main thing that makes a game as engaging as it is it's feeding into one of 3 primary emotional drivers for you as a person. It's giving you a chance to achieve something. It's giving you a chance to be recognized, either to recognize in yourself or to be recognized by your group of peers or the internet or whatever. And it's giving you a chance to find some sense of satisfaction from whatever it is that drives you. Now, all of those earlier things that we think about when you see the word gamification, those are not these. Those are just the mechanics by which you can deliver on some of these psychological rewards. But you do not need to go and build a $100,000 game to achieve this. You can go and spend $5,000 with a game designer and make a board game and go to Kinko's. I'm sorry, FedEx office. I've done that 20,000 times in my life. Now, it's research gamification, so you do need to do this in a way that contributes to the insights process. If you're just making a game to make it fun and to make the environment engaging, you're really wasting time and money. You don't need to go through all that. You can, however, replace huge swaths of your research process with a game experience. So the real question, why now? Why are we talking about gamification now? Research has been around for a very long time. It's really pretty simple in my mind. If you look at age groups, these are what percent of the US population has played a game in the past month compared to a few generations ago. I apologize for this next little bit. There's going to be some earbugs that didn't get played for you. You're not going to get these out of your head for like a day and a half. I did it to myself when I was building the slides. So, quick quiz. How many recognize it? Yeah, so everybody here recognizes that. That came out in 1980, Pac-Man. So beginning of the gamification adoption curve here, right? Next earbug. Who recognizes this one? So it's coming down a little bit. We're seeing the age chart in the room kind of settle. That is Tetris. This is the one that's been stuck in my head for 2 days. And that released over the course of actually 5 years. It came out in Russia in 1984 and slowly escaped through the Iron Curtain to the rest of the world. Last one, and then I'll move on, I promise. So you kids know this one. This is Sonic. I have others that go deeper into the curve here. I'll spare you those because you probably are definitely not going to recognize them. But this to me, this is the main reason why the research industry has not strongly embrace gamification is that most of us just don't understand this subculture. It used to be a subculture. It's no longer a subculture when a third of the population is doing it every month. And so that is why, as an engagement tool for us, especially in a qualitative research setting, this has been tremendously useful. So where we're looking to go next with gamification, several different things that we're brainstorming, but it's really pretty simple for us. We're taking the design mechanics that we know from these things, and we're applying them in a research setting. So it's just a question of redesigning game rules that elicit the information you're looking for, but do it in a more structured way. So group product optimization games, we're actually looking at card games and Pictionary-style games that can be used to crowdsource is another overloaded buzzword, I suppose. But to do that sort of an exercise, but in a fun and engaging way. A live-action match stiff game. This sounds really dorky, I know, but it's kind of cool. Pictionary-style qual groups. And then the last one, this is the most complicated one, and it's probably going to be the last one that we're actually able to achieve. This is the one that everybody thinks about, which is a game-based survey engine. So, hey, isn't there some way I can just take my normal survey and plop it into something else and gamify it and make it more relevant? No, there's not. But here's another way to kind of look at your traditional online quant work. A survey is a game. It's just a really boring one. Okay. It has rules. The rules of the game are answer each question page by page according to the instructions on the page. The victory condition is to finish the damn thing. And maybe the reward is, it's not achievement, unless you really get excited about the prospect of finishing surveys. But if you just rethink a little bit the survey experience from the user point of view, and you think about how can I lead somebody through this exercise, still collect the data I'm looking for, but just tell a story with it as you're going on. Get a good fiction writer to do a little short story and interject your stuff along the way. Weave your topic into the content. That's one approach. The thing I've been thinking about lately is Oregon Trail. Does anybody remember the old game Oregon Trail on the apples in grade school, right? So that was education gamification. That was, we're going to teach you something about American history, but we're going to have you play a game along the way. And it's basically just a choice engine as you're making decisions about what you want to do from point A to point B. Same goes with, oh shoot, I just totally blanked out on it. Sorry, it was great, I'm sure. It'll come back. But that's all the prepared content I have. Apparently I should have put in some more of those earbuds for you. But if you want, I'll pull up the laptop and I'll play them afterwards. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. As a couple of middle-aged, gray-haired men, I was reminded by Betty Adamu, who's not here, but I often refer to her affectionately as the queen of gamification.
Title well earned.
A title well earned. She and John Polston, I'm going to start off and just ask you, they've done extensive research on gamification in the research field. From where you sit, what's the end objective? Is it about making people less pissed off at the survey experience, or is it actually just, or is there evidence to suggest it's giving us better insights?
I think it's, so there's the snarky answer, which is to make it suck less. There's a few different use cases. One would be for younger audiences, it's highly relevant because that is right in the sweet spot of something that they understand and will engage with. For older audiences, meaning to say 20-somethings, 30-somethings, they grew up with games. They don't get a lot of opportunities or as many as they used to go back and play a game. So there's a little bit of a, like you'll put more time into the experience because it feels like a game than you would if it was just a survey. My main concern with the survey work that we've done within the games industry is that the long format survey structure just implodes completely beyond maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and people just start they try to game the survey and just, how do I get through this thing as fast as I can to get whatever my incentive was? And so part of it is how do I give back to my respondent a little bit of respect for the time that they're giving to me. So I have real reservations about the quality of the data I get to begin with in the current environment. And so this is a way to make that still viable for a longer period of time for me.
Okay. Questions? Go ahead. Just middle, left-hand side. Thank you.
So what would your recommendations be, to a company that's doing a lot of research, and obviously we can't gamify everything. What's the first step to gamification and engaging our consumers or respondents better?
So I would start small. Because again, there's going to be an internal education process around how do I take this methodology and apply it, and how to identify the right categories and the right target audiences that it would work with. I would start with something like we did, start with something offline, really, because your costs are going to be lower, and you'll get a much shorter development cycle to be able to try it out, get some client feedback to make sure that it's resonating with them. From there, I would probably move into maybe some small online survey game work. Nothing as extravagant as a replacement for a 20-minute survey, but something I could do like a 5 or 10-minute exercise that you could build for sub 100K and get repeated use out of. That's where I would go.
As researchers and as respondents, we're subject to lots of online surveys. They all seem to be, well, there's some variation in how visually exciting it is, let's put it that way. I don't think they reach the threshold of games. But do you know of any platforms that are doing a better job, or if none, why aren't they doing a better job of making the task of taking a survey more engaging, which really is the ultimate incentive for completion?
Yeah. I suspect it's a question of priority, because there's certainly an abundant number of creative resources out there. Like if you just wanted somebody to do some custom artwork to make the survey look nicer, so at least then there's a little bit of an incentive to at least click through and see what's going to happen with the artwork and maybe tell a story in the background. It's cheap, but it's not very complicated. You could certainly do that. I think it's a question of unknown ROI and unknown impact on the methodology, right? So if it's not been proven out to everybody's satisfaction that this is on par or superior to the way we do things today, the general reaction from what I've seen in the community is let's just not go there. There's no incentive to do that. I'm on the other side of the fence. I'm already a believer, so I don't spend a lot of time trying to prove it to myself because I've been living in it for the past decade. That's just how we've been doing things. Maybe over the next year, now that I've spun out of Blizzard and I'm off working with other folks, I'll have some motivation to continue the education process. But for now, I think it's just a priority question more than anything else. Animated slider bars, that doesn't change the experience at all. It's not going to be an order of magnitude effect, right? It's really more fundamental things like if I click this link on the email that I opened up on my iPhone, is it going to look correct on my iPhone when I continue that process? Am I going to be able to click and drag things around as if it was a native app like I would if I installed a game on my app? That sort of thing. And it's a much more technically complicated problem than the research community would typically address. And if you don't have the right resources internally to work on it, it's just not going to get pursued. Personal opinion.
Any other questions? Take one more, two more, okay? Over here, and then one in the front, just on the left next. Go ahead.
Pardon this, it might sound a bit naive, but is essentially, are you bringing gamification to surveys to essentially sort of lower acquisition costs? Because as far as engagement goes, it could be a really boring survey. What if you give somebody $20 to do it? Chances are that they'll fill it out. So is that where gamification is sort of coming in?
So
is that the lens by which you're looking at?
My first reaction is I've never been paid $20 for a survey. If everybody were being offered $20 to take a survey, this would not be nearly as large an issue as it feels right now, because that would feel like a much more rational compensation for the time you're putting into it. So yes, there is a relationship between the reaction to the experience and the drop-off rate. And we get like twice as good complete rates on our gamified surveys as we do on our regular ones. And so that's, like, for us, that's a pretty big impact. But that's, yeah.
Can I ask the second part? So there are two approaches to gamifying it, right? You could either gamify the content, the survey content itself, or present, or a little bit easier would be to present that survey within an in-app game or within the gamified experience.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any sort of existing tools to do the former or latter? Would anybody who?
I mean, there's toolkits out there, companies like Bunchball that have infrastructure for gamification mechanics that can be applied to any business process, really. They focus more on the CRM side of things and loyalty programs and whatnot, but you could certainly integrate some of that into panel infrastructure, for example, and change the reward mechanism to feel more like a game than what it is today. But you're still asking them to go through 40 questions on a weird format. So I've been working with my clients to focus on this easier problem from our point of view, which is what can we do outside the constraints of the panel environment, the part of the world that we have direct control over. And then if we can prove success in that world, then it's much easier for us to go out to the larger community and say, hey, this stuff's working here. Why don't we try to do it in a bigger scale?
Okay. Last question in the front. Do we need a mic? Okay, go ahead.
So, as somebody that does a lot of research with consumers, one of our problems is that consumers spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what the answers are we want them to give us. And my fervent hope for gamification is that we reduce that kind of filtering to the point where we get better quality information. Do you have any evidence that we found a way to do that?
I can't quantify it.
I can.
I'll let you.
No, go ahead.
What I can say, is it positive, I assume? That's good. Yeah.
I'm going to follow up your
all right.
answer with another one.
So what we have seen is that people's guard comes down a lot when they're just playing in a game environment, and some of the color commentary that happens on the sideline, the barriers are down and they're just totally wide open. Now, the risk is that it is still a game, and so games have rules, and rules can be manipulated, and so you have to be really cognizant of that as you're designing your game system to minimize those risks. But I mean, overall, I'd say yes, our experience has been very positive.
I would simply add to that, having had the opportunity to author a paper with John Poulston from GMI, who's won multiple awards for the work he's done on gamification research. I think slightly different, but research purposed is, to answer that direct question, is establishing a fit-for-purpose use of gamification. If you ask Coca-Cola, should I gamify my tracking study, they'll tell you that blowing on a tracker will change the results. You don't gamify a longitudinal study just for like that. And I think that's where the industry has to take a step back and say, what am I doing and why am I doing it, and what outcome do I expect, and what's the purpose for doing it? So I think you're absolutely right that targeting an audience or a younger group of people who are not interested in a grid that you have to be on Coke to fill out, not the drinking one, that yes, there's a fit for purpose. I'll share. There's I think some interesting articles that have already been public domain published, and I think we should try to make those available through the site. Jason, thank you very much. Well done.